morning. Welcome to yet another new week with the Morning Momentum, your daily dose of a comprehensive rundown of the top stories making the headlines on the papers every morning. Let's start with the Standard newspaper. Ruto term limit. Jitas over push for extra years. Now, Nandi Senator Samson Cherargei has submitted a memorandum to the bipartisan talks team to increase the presidential term limit to 7 years. But lawyers and politicians are having none of that, asking the team to ignore the request, but others see hidden hand in the drive. That story is beefed up for you on page 4 of the Standard this morning. Inside Gachagua meeting to trim Kuria to size. That story is also beefed up for you inside the Standard on page 8. And on sports news, Eliud the fifth. Kipchoge won by 31 seconds, the fifth fastest time of his illustrious career. That story is beefed up for you on page 2 and page 32. Let's take a look at the top stories inside the Standard this morning. Now, on page 2, Kipchoge, a glimpse into life, mind of greatest marathoner. The most celebrated athlete on the planet maintains a rigorous schedule that leaves little room for leisure, wakes up at 5:45 a.m. and begins his day with a prayer in a place he considers sacred, which is the toilet. That story is beefed up for you on page 2. On page 3, oxygen plant expensive to maintain, says a report. 14 million shillings oxygen plant at Taita Taveta Hospital, not operational 3 years on. County spending extra cash to purchase oxygen from British Oxygen Company. That story is beefed up for you on page 3 of the Standard this morning. On page 4, Ruto could serve for 19 years if a proposal by Cherargei is adopted. The Nandi senator wants presidential term increased to 7 years from 5. Bid comes months after Fafi MP Yakub Salah proposed to have term limit scrapped. That story is beefed up for you on page 24. On page 5, publishers lose 300 million shillings to pirates yearly, stakeholders say. Call on the authorities to tighten the laws on piracy. Nairobi International Book Fair starts on Wednesday. That story is beefed up for you on page 5. Let's take a look at page 6. KRA, KPA to auction overstayed imported goods at Mombasa Port. Abandoned imported goods are to be disposed of via auction or destruction depending on their state. Transit cargo with missing documents to be reshipped to the country of origin. That story is beefed up for you on page 6. On page 7, Kakamega Assembly on the spot, over 122 million shillings dubious payment. There was no evidence provided to demonstrate that quotations were requested in accordance with the law. Payments for water supply lacked essential documents such as local purchase orders. That story is beefed up for you on page 7. On page 8, inside Gachagua's meeting to tame Kuria as fight for Mount Kenya grows. DP met a section of Mount Kenya leaders to discuss trade, industry, and investment CSS conduct. Gachagua's ally says they support a review of the performance of key senior government officials and relieving CSS who have failed to run their dockets. That story is beefed up for you on page 8. Moving on swiftly to page 10. Oruoba's suspension not isolated. Other MPs have faced such wrath. Legislators who have faced similar harsh sanctions include Murathe Ndichu and Wandai. Wandai was among CORD MPs who led a whistling protest against Uhuru Kenyatta. That story is beefed up for you on page 10 of the Standard this morning. On page 11, Meru MCAs in renewed call to get Governor Mwangaza impeached. Now, earlier this year, Gachagua presided over a reconciliation initiative between Mwangaza and MCAs. The MCAs said they will support A ward equalization bill forwarded to the assembly by the executive. That story is beefed up for you on page 11 of the Standard this morning. Let's shift gears and take a look at some expert opinion. Should President heed public calls and sack courier? Now, Festus Chai says he's no longer fit to hold public office, so he should be sacked. On the contrary, Eliud Karobia says no, CS wants to win public sympathy. That story is beefed up for you on page 13. Let's move on to some other news in page 16. Worker position in the Kenya-US trade agreement needs a rethink. The failure of the US government to address labor rights, including in the agriculture sector, must also be on the table. There is currently very little information regarding the potential scope of the labor provisions. That story is beefed up for you on page 16 of the Standard this morning. The health and science article is also beefed up for you inside the Standard. Let's move on to page 17, Planet Action. Heavy fines or jail for failure to sort waste measures come as a response to the Sustainable Waste Management Act of 2022. They are designed to transition the country's waste management to a sustainable circular model. That story is beefed up for you on page 17. On page 18, COP28 breaks new ground with plans of First Health Day, first ever day linking health and climate change will be held at the upcoming conference in Dubai. That story is beefed up for you on page 18. Page 19, the Standard Business. Now, Mombasa in partnership with airline to promote tourism. Partnership aims to enhance travel experience for both domestic and international tourists. The carrier has flown over 256,000 visitors to the coastal city in the last year. That story is beefed up for you on page 19. Let's move on to international news inside the Standard this morning. How a government shutdown in US could impact Americans. 4 million federal employees will feel the effect immediately. Essential workers will remain on the job, but others will be far left until the shutdown is over. That story is beefed up for you on page 21. Let's move on to page 22. From playgrounds to parade grounds, how Russian schools are becoming militarized. Voluntary companies of teenagers are being formed, and the national curriculum is being changed to emphasize defense of the motherland. Education Minister said recently that there are now about 10,000 so-called military patriotic clubs in Russian schools and colleges. That story is beefed up for you on page 22 of the Standard this morning. On page 23, inside the camp at the heart of migrant surge, hotspot has been overwhelmed beyond its capacity. The Italian Red Cross estimates the island hosted at least 10,000 newly arrived people last week. That story is beefed up for you on page 23 of the Standard this morning. Let's shift gears and take a look at sports news this morning. It's all about golf. The top story, Gitonga wins monthly mag in Nanyuki. He posted 33 net from his outward 9 and 36 net from his inward 9 to win 69 net. Kinyori posted 38 stable effort points to lift International Day of Peace Golf title at Railway Club. That story is beefed up for you on page 29 this morning. In boxing, Denzel defeats Onyango of Uganda in tie. Denzel Onyango of Kenya is the new World Alliance Boxing Association Africa Supreme light heavyweight champion. That story is beefed up for you on page 29. Let's take a look at page 30. Athletics Stars Star Eldoret City Marathon Show. The race, billed as among the highest paying marathons in Africa, has produced big shots. Kipchirchir, World Marathon silver medalist Korir, and 2012 Boston Marathon winner Cherop Among top stars who won Eldoret City Marathon, that story is beefed up for you on page 30. On page 31, Arsenal Spurs play out thrilling derby draw at Emirates Stadium. That story is beefed up for you on page 31. Now, Saka restored Ghana's lead from the spot after Romero handball only for Son set up Maddison to level again in the 55th minute. Nunes helps fire Liverpool to win over West Ham as Watkins winner piles more misery to 10-man Chelsea. That story is beefed up for you on page 31. On the cover page of the Standard this morning, Kipchoge chalks up 5th title at Berlin Marathon. Eliud has set 2 world records in the German Premier 42-kilometer race, having won 16 of these career marathons. Kipkemoi and Chepkirui take runner-up spots as Ethiopia's Asefa sets women's mixed world record. That story is beefed up for you on page 32. Up to that point, we take a quick break and then we come back with the top stories inside the Daily Nation. Keep interacting with us at Younib_TV on Instagram and Younib Media TV on Facebook and YouTube. You can also send in your sentiments via our SMS line 0719 144 144. See you on the other side of this broadcast.
In 1889, boxes that could reproduce sound were invented. Forget about history. Younib Music Studio is equipped with the latest technology and staffed with experienced sound engineers who will make your experience fun, engaging, groovy, and fulfilling as your music dreams become a reality. We offer music recording, commercial adverts, skeezer tunes, podcast, and voiceovers. We are located in Syker along Kangondo Road, and you can also reach us on our social media platforms on Younib TV on Instagram and Younib Media on Facebook, or call us on 0719 144 144. Younib, ever the best.
Welcome back to the Morning Momentum. If you are just joining the conversation, use the hashtag The Morning Momentum. I am still your host with the most, Alfonsoh. Now, let's take a look at the top stories inside the Daily Nation this morning. Fees windfall for private varsities. Now, some students who had been placed in courses in public universities have not reported. Private universities have reported a high demand for admissions as students shun public ones following the adoption of the new funding model that may perceive as expensive, especially because of the loan component. The development is a huge relief for the private institutions that have experienced low intakes since 2016. That story is beefed up for you on page 7 of the Daily Nation this morning. King Kipchoge does it again. Eliud Kipchoge crosses the finish line to secure his 5th victory in the men's race at yesterday's Berlin Marathon in Germany. That story is also beefed up for you on page 35 and page 36. In other news, El Nino, Kenyans remember 1997 as they prepare for deluge. Now, one of the unhappy pages in the country's history books is the impact of a 10-month rainy season that hit Kenyans in 1997. When the rains began in May that year, some people imagined they would subside in a matter of days or weeks, but they lasted until February 1998. That story is beefed up for you on page 2 and page 3. Now, my 53 years in legal practice and why I don't own a smartphone, that is Kaminwa. That story is beefed up for you on page 4 and page 5. We'll take a look at the story. Why state is leasing out some Mombasa and Lamu port assets. Lack of adequate funds has forced the government to backtrack on its earlier opposition to the privatization of key infrastructure at the ports of Mombasa and Lamu. That story is beefed up for you on page 10. In the political field, proposal to amend presidential term limits sparks outrage. That story is beefed up for you on page 6. Let's take a look at page 2 of the Daily Nation this morning. Kenyans recall terrible effects of 1997 El Nino rains as they prepare. Meteorology agencies have called on governments to take early action to mitigate the effects of above normal rains expected between October and December. That story is beefed up for you on page 2 of the Daily Nation. On page 3, Health Ministry's preparations. Officials say health facilities will be stocked with essential medicines and commodities. That story is beefed up for you on page 3. Expected El Nino rains could lead to spread of waterborne diseases such as cholera. Let's take a look at page 4. Haminwa, my 53 years as a lawyer and why I don't own a smartphone. He lost his wife of 48 years in 2014. As he reflects on his 87 years of life, Mr. Haminwa says that the death of his wife, son, and his brother Charles Ford left a big wound in his life, but this has not stopped him from working. His office in Lavington is a hive of activity. Always donning a trench coat and a black hat, Mr. Haminwa, together with his team of researchers, are always busy. At a glance, rich career of a decorated lawyer. His career in law has seen him serve as state counsel, a magistrate, and a deputy registrar of the judiciary. He would later, in 1968, cross over to Uganda, where he served as the principal legal assistant of the East African Commission, where he rose to the position of the deputy counsel. That amazing story is beefed up for you on page 4 and page 5 of the Daily Nation this morning. Let's take a look at page 6. Cherargei bid to extend term limits for president resisted. Critics view proposal as a ploy by Kenya Kwanza to introduce presidents for life in future. Senator's proposal has been resisted by opposition leaders and opinion shapers who says it's ill-advised. That story is beefed up for you on page 6. Let's take a look at page 7. The new funding model turns into a windfall for private varsities. Vice chancellors of private universities say there was a misconception that their courses were expensive. While students in public universities get scholarships and loans, their private university counterparts are only eligible for loans. That story is beefed up for you on page 7. Let's take a look at page 8. Give dialogue team time to deliver, Raila tells Kenyans. Mr. Odinga says if the outcome of the talks is unacceptable, Azimio will take unspecified action. Azimio leader claims that the Kenya Kwanza government is stifling devolution. That story is beefed up for you on page 8 of the Standard of the Daily Nation this morning. Let's move on to page 10. Lack of funds forces state to lease out Mombasa and Lamu port assets. New operators seeking to lease the ports and the Lamu Special Economic Zone will pay more than $700 million. That story is beefed up for you on page 10. Let's take a look at expert opinion inside the Daily Nation. Tackle crisis in the new varsity funding model. There is new disturbing development that could have serious ramifications in the education sector. The growing preference for private universities by applicants over the public ones following the introduction of the controversial new student funding model. That story is beefed up for you on page 13. Let's move on to county news, and we start with Nakuru County. State lifts caveat on land near Mau after 20 years. Governor and land CS plan on issuing of titles in affected areas. Leaders and residents say caveat had made it difficult to develop their land. That story is beefed up for you on page 16. Let's take a look at Homa Bay County. 50 women picked to pioneer soybean farming. You can catch up with that story on page 16. In a nutshell, on page 17, in Nairobi County, no resettlement for Chokaa demolition victims, says CS. Still in Nairobi, 200 left homeless as fire raises settlement. Also in Coast, Kingi Party resists calls to fold up and join UDA, that is in Kilifi County. In Kwale County, reforestation of River Mwache kicks off. That story is beefed up for you on page 17. Now, in Tana River, look after victims of terror attacks, state urged. Also in Uasin Gishu County, JSC seeking elders' help in reducing case backlog. That story also on page 17. Let's move on to international news. Mali will not stand idly by if military intervention in Niger. ECOWAS has threatened the coup leaders with military intervention. Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso have signed a defense pact for mutual assistance in the face of the attack. That story is beefed up for you on page 18 of the Daily Nation this morning. Let's move on to some other news. There is the junior sport for kids inside here with some educative content. You can catch up with that inside the Daily Nation this morning. Let's shift gears to business news. State Farms tapped 14.7 billion shillings bank loans during July, lending to parastatals to take hitting on lucrative bonds bills. In other news, consumers pay more as production of sugar down 31%. You can catch up with that story on page 19 of the Daily Nation this morning. Let's shift gears to sports news inside the Daily Nation this morning and see the stories making the headlines. Now, FKF Premier League, Omala dreams big as his goal earns goal draw at Homeboys. We'll take a look at that in page 34. Now, Springboks hit reset after loss to Ireland. Books lie second in Pool B and need to beat Tonga on Sunday to be sure of quarterfinals. South Africa pay dearly for indifferent goal kicking. That story is beefed up for you on page 33. Also, Kenya's Karanga wins Ghana Open. Kenya's leading amateur golfer, Michael Karanga, completed an all-round total of 6 under 210 to clinch the overall title in Ghana Open Golf Tour Tournament at the Par 72 Center of the World Golf Club in Tema, Ghana yesterday. That story is beefed up for you on page 33. Let's take a look at page 34. You do not become a Gor Mahia fan, you are born one. Now, these are sentiments by Stephen Omondi. I don't know and really don't care about what it takes to become a fan of our miserable shemejis and the other Kenyan clubs with only a handful of fans. Well, that is a story you want to catch up with on page 34. Kenyan Premier League, Gor Mahia held Ulinzi Stars test victory as leaders Posta Rangers extend good run. That story is beefed up for you on page 34. On page 35, Wall of Fame launch, Street Watch Party highlight iconic 49th Berlin Marathon. German Ambassador Groth and his host Governor B joins fans in Eldoret. That story is beefed up for you on page 35. And that is all about the 2023 Berlin Marathon. You want to catch up with that story on page 35. Lastly, on the cover page of the Daily Nation this morning, NTV party goes wild in Eldoret as Kipchoge, a safer make history in Berlin. More than 47,000 participants turn out for 49th edition of Elite Race. Eliud wins 5th title in Berlin as Ethiopian tops women's race in new world record. That story is beefed up for you on the cover page. Congratulations, Eliud Kipchoge, wherever you are, you have made us proud, and that is a job well done. Now, with that story of the greatest of all times, we come to an end of today's session of the Morning Momentum. Thank you so much for choosing to stay with Younib TV. And also, I want to extend my gratitude to all those who made this broadcast a success. Behind the cameras, Raphael Wangila, and the Chief Controller, Anifa Kavira. I have been your host, Alfonsoh. See you tomorrow, same time, same place. Until then, do have a beautiful Monday. Bye-bye.